Good evening. In a devastating escalation of violence in West Africa, suspected Boko Haram fighters have killed at least 56 people and displaced more than 17,000 residents in a brutal attack on three communities in Niger State, Nigeria. This is Kenya News Update today, and I'm your host. We're taking a deep dive into this tragedy, the broader regional security crisis, and the complex geopolitical forces at play. The attack, which occurred on February 14th, targeted the villages of Konkoso, Tungan Makari, and Pissa in the Borgu local government area. According to a situation report from the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, the insurgents killed residents, predominantly men and young boys, and abducted dozens of women and children, including health workers. This single event has created a humanitarian catastrophe overnight. To understand the scale, let's visualize the immediate impact. The attack resulted in 56 confirmed fatalities. More than 17,000 people were forcibly displaced from their homes, and an unknown number, described as dozens, were abducted, with women, children, and health workers specifically targeted. This is not an isolated incident. It represents a dangerous expansion and intensification of Boko Haram's operations beyond its traditional strongholds in northeastern Nigeria. For over a decade, the group has waged a brutal insurgency, but recent months have seen a worrying shift in tactics and geography. To put this in context, we need to examine the regional security landscape. The Lake Chad Basin region, encompassing parts of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, has been the epicenter of the conflict. The Multinational Joint Task Force, a regional military coalition, has been operating since 2015. Its total authorized strength is 10,700 personnel. However, funding and operational challenges have persistently hampered its effectiveness. In the 2024 fiscal year, the task force's operational budget was just $7,000, a stark illustration of the resource constraints facing regional security efforts. This attack in Niger State, which is in north-central Nigeria, not the neighboring country of Niger, signals Boko Haram's ability to strike deeper into the country's heartland, exploiting porous borders and ungoverned spaces. The timing is also critical. This violence comes amid significant political transitions across the Sahel. In Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu is grappling with immense security challenges on multiple fronts. In the United States, President Donald Trump, now in his second term, has signaled a shift in foreign policy priorities, with potential implications for counterterrorism partnerships in Africa. And here in Kenya, President William Ruto has positioned the nation as a key security partner in East Africa, but the West African crisis presents a different set of complexities. So, what are the perspectives on this crisis? We'll present three distinct viewpoints. First, the humanitarian and human security perspective. Aid organizations on the ground describe a scene of utter devastation. The UNICEF report highlights the specific targeting of community pillars, men, young boys, and health workers, a tactic designed to cripple a community's resilience and future. The displacement of 17,000 people overwhelms already strained resources. Camps lack adequate shelter, clean water, and medical supplies. The abduction of women and children follows a horrific pattern of using sexual violence and forced recruitment as weapons of war. A Médecins Sans Frontières coordinator in the region recently stated, and I quote, "We are seeing a systematic dismantling of community life. It's not just violence. It's the eradication of the very foundations that allow people to survive and recover." This quote underscores the calculated cruelty of these attacks. The second perspective is the regional military and security viewpoint. Analysts point to a potential fragmentation within Boko Haram and its splinter faction, the Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP. This internal competition may be driving more audacious attacks to demonstrate strength and recruit new followers. Furthermore, the security vacuum created by political instability in neighboring Niger, following a coup in 2023, has created new safe havens and smuggling routes for insurgents. The Multinational Joint Task Force, while a crucial framework, is often criticized for being reactive rather than proactive. Its challenges are multifaceted. It faces chronic underfunding, with contributions from member states often delayed or insufficient. There are issues with intelligence sharing and interoperability between the different national contingents, and a lack of adequate air support and surveillance technology limits its ability to track and engage highly mobile insurgent groups across vast desert and savanna terrain. The third perspective is the geopolitical and resource dimension. The Sahel region is rich in natural resources, including uranium, gold, and oil. Control over smuggling routes for these resources, as well as for people, drugs, and arms, is a key financier of insurgent groups. Some analysts argue that international counterterrorism efforts have sometimes focused too narrowly on military solutions without addressing the underlying governance and economic drivers of conflict. Corruption, lack of state services, and youth unemployment create a fertile ground for recruitment. With global powers like the United States, Russia through the Wagner Group, and former colonial powers like France all having interests in the region, the conflict is often exacerbated by competing proxies. This brings us to a disturbing parallel emerging in another part of Africa. In Sudan, a separate but equally brutal conflict rages between the National Army and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. A new analysis by legal experts, citing satellite and sensor data, presents strong evidence that the RSF has committed a war crime in Darfur by deliberately depriving villages of the means to produce food. Experts describe this as a long-term starvation strategy, a form of extraordinary cruelty aimed at destroying agricultural communities. While the actors are different, Boko Haram in Nigeria, RSF in Sudan, the tactic of targeting a population's livelihood and survival mechanisms is chillingly similar. It represents a shift towards what security experts call total conflict, where the distinction between combatant and civilian is completely erased and the goal is societal collapse. Let's compare the core tactics used in these two crises. In Niger State, Nigeria, Boko Haram employed direct, violent assault resulting in mass casualties and kidnappings. In Darfur, Sudan, the RSF is implicated in a strategy of systematic starvation and destruction of farmland. Both strategies aim for mass displacement and the destruction of community cohesion. Both have resulted in catastrophic humanitarian outcomes with tens of thousands displaced. And critically, both may constitute war crimes under international law, specifically violations of the Geneva Conventions pertaining to the protection of civilians. The international response to these crises has been fragmented. In Nigeria, the government's approach has heavily relied on its military, with mixed results. There have been successes in degrading the group's territorial control, but its ability to launch spectacular attacks remains. The Lake Chad Basin Commission, which oversees the MNJTF, continues to appeal for greater international support. The African Union has condemned the attacks but has limited capacity for direct intervention. The United Nations Security Council has issued statements but has been paralyzed by broader geopolitical divisions, particularly regarding the conflicts in Sudan and the Sahel. The role of the United States is in flux. The Trump administration has historically expressed skepticism towards long-term nation-building and counterinsurgency projects abroad. Current policy is likely focused on preventing the emergence of direct threats to the American homeland, which could mean a continued but more selective partnership, potentially emphasizing intelligence sharing and targeted strikes over large-scale troop deployments or development aid. This presents a dilemma for regional allies. So, what are the potential pathways forward? We see three possible scenarios, each with significant challenges. Scenario 1 is a sustained regional military surge. This would require the Lake Chad Basin countries, potentially with support from the African Union and external partners, to significantly increase funding, troops, and intelligence capabilities for the MNJTF. The goal would be to launch coordinated, simultaneous operations to disrupt command nodes and supply lines. However, the risk here is that a purely military solution could fuel further resentment and recruitment if not paired with immediate humanitarian relief and governance initiatives. It also requires a level of political will and trust between nations that has been elusive. Scenario 2 is a negotiated settlement or localized ceasefire. This is arguably the most complex path. It would involve engaging with factions of Boko Haram or ISWAP that may be willing to lay down arms. Nigeria has attempted this in the past with the super camp strategy and rehabilitation programs for repentant fighters. The challenges are immense: identifying credible interlocutors, ensuring community acceptance of former fighters, and addressing the deep ideological roots of the conflict. Without a parallel process to deliver justice and address grievances, such settlements can be unstable. Scenario 3 is the current trajectory, a protracted, low-intensity conflict. This is, unfortunately, the most likely scenario in the short to medium term. It involves continued sporadic attacks, mass displacement, and a heavy reliance on humanitarian aid to manage the consequences. The human and economic costs would be staggering. Nigeria would continue to bleed resources needed for development into security. The region would remain a breeding ground for instability, with ripple effects on migration, trafficking, and radicalization that could reach far beyond West Africa. For Kenya and East Africa, the lessons are clear. While geographically distant, the drivers of conflict, youth unemployment, climate stress, governance deficits, and external interference, are not unique to West Africa. Kenya's experience in Somalia with the African Union mission highlights both the potential and the pitfalls of regional military engagement. President Ruto's administration must watch these developments closely, as they influence continental security architectures and the flow of illicit arms that can fuel local conflicts. The attack in Niger State is more than a headline. It is a stark data point in a worsening trend. 56 lives lost, 17,000 people displaced. A community shattered. It reflects the failure of multiple strategies and the urgent need for a coherent, humane, and sustainable response that addresses both the symptoms and the root causes of violence. The world cannot afford to look away. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today.